which is tied to EPC, so the Energy Performance Certificate, and Labour have called it the Warmer Homes Plan. Funny enough, the Conservatives had a very similar title for it. I can't remember what it was, but very, very, I think if they had copyright on it, there'd be a case. But there was a slightly different title, but very similar agenda. In general, the agenda, of course, is to make homes more energy efficient, more affordable for people to run, and more comfortable for tenants, which I absolutely support. It makes absolute sense. I think all landlords would like to provide homes that meet that criteria. Generally, though, that is a very costly process, particularly for the type of property that we often deal with in the northeast, so the older tourist properties that 100 years ago weren't built with energy efficiency in mind. So those type of properties can find this process difficult. So the general sort of thrust of the legislation is to increase energy efficiency of all property stock. Getting properties to an EPC rating of C is what always gets mentioned in the press as the aspiration. There was a target date for this previously that got deleted and abandoned. I think it was 2026, if I remember rightly, but it became clear there was just no mechanism to get there. Because it's fair to say, as landlords, it will be impossible for us to invest the sort of money that is often required to make the required change to get where the properties need to be. So there's this general acknowledgement that both landlords and, to be fair, homeowners would probably need some help. And there probably will be some kind of grant scheme or funding scheme to come. Probably many of you know in the past there's been numerous government initiatives in different forms. AMRP has utilised various of them, but what would happen in the past usually, a new scheme will be thought of and implemented. They all had their pluses and minuses. By the time it really got any speed, they would have cancelled it. And, and a new scheme came along. So in the past, we would typically get some success and then the scheme would disappear and you wait for the next one. But at the moment, and this is a bit of an offer this evening, so another action point for landlords, I guess. Every political party had this as a priority about homes being improved in terms of energy efficiency. So we know we have this to come. We know we're going to have to tackle it. They're now saying 2030. They want homes at EPC C. So we have built a relationship with one of the top 6 utility companies. We have a bit of a partnership, so they're looking at some of our managed properties for our current landlords at the moment. And those properties will potentially benefit from a range of fully funded measures. They're talking about things like air source heat pumps, new gas boilers, even solar panels, internal external wall insulation. So it's property by property, but it is fully funded. The tenant can be with any utility company. And as long as they're on any benefit, they are potentially eligible. So the offer this evening, at present, the partnership we have, they're working through, as you can imagine, we will offer this to our managed clients first because they have to come first. After that, we will be able to open it up. So if anyone felt they had a property that would be EPC rating of D or below, where you have a tenant who's in receipt of some form of benefit, so it can be even sort of pension credits and stuff like that, then what I'm going to suggest, either if you let Lewis know in the chat, just sort of contact details, and we'll not ask for property addresses at this moment. I think even if you just let us know how many properties you think, mainly because we'll manage the work plan. As you can imagine, they're currently looking at 250 properties for us. I know when we open this up, this could go wild. So even if we could if people were interested in this evening, it costs nothing to do the assessment, obviously, and the work's fully funded. So even if Lewis could compile a list of names and a rough number of how many properties you think you would have to look at, we can then sort of slowly work through with that utility company a sort of plan of work to have those properties looked at. I have popped Lewis's email on there, so if you don't get a chance to do that tonight in the chat, you could just drop an email at some point and let him know roughly how many properties. The reason I'm asking for properties is if someone's got one, that's fairly easy to slip in, but if it was 20, 30, 40, 50, that's a bigger piece of work. But basically what they do initially, it's a desktop assessment. So If we just get expressions of interest this evening, for want of a better word, we or the utility company would come back separately, get the addresses, and then what they do is offline as a desktop, they look at the EPC and they do a sort of viability assessment. Then and only if it's viable, there will be a tenant appointment. Lewis has recently had the unenviable job of ringing all the tenants to warn them that they would have this call shortly. Once that's done, in effect, that utility company gets in touch direct and they take it forward. So they really do a lot of the sort of the hard work thereafter. But we are going to have to manage the flow so that it remains manageable. So, but that is an offer from this evening that if anyone wants to tap into that partnership, they can. As you can imagine, naturally, we'll deal with managed clients first, because that's obviously one of the benefits that our clients who are on our books manage will get. But we'll extend it after that to other people in our network. So either via the chat or sales@mrp.co.uk to Lewis separately, and we'll sort of get you on that waiting list to be referred to have a look at your properties. But this is a real opportunity, I guess. We know we will have to do something with energy efficiency as things move forward. So if we can get something fully funded over the next 6 to 12 months that doesn't cost us as landlords, then it's an opportunity that we really have to explore, I guess. So a bit of an offer for this evening. So register your interest if that's something that would be helpful. Is the chat?
Yes, a few questions. So I've got one. Some of my properties are older properties, basically made of just some random rubble. No gas supply is possible there. How on earth are they supposed to make a property like that look great?
It's funny enough, that kind of property is exactly one there, and they always talk about off gas grid properties. So they're always interested in properties that don't have gas. Because usually they'll fit more efficient heating sources. The system does acknowledge that, a cottage in a farmer's field that is single brick stone, there's only so far you can go with those properties. And there'll be some properties that never get to a C, but what they will do is they will do as much as they can. So I guess they might deem that it can have an air source heat pump outside that's highly efficient, runs off electric. So yeah, you'd be surprised that there will probably be measures they can deliver funded to that property. It may not get to the C, but if they can demonstrate that they've done everything they can, then you become compliant. So it will be worth referring, basically, is the answer to the question.
Then I have one from Claire, just saying, what are easy ways or easy wins just to raise the EPC up for your typical terrace treehouse? Yeah,
funny enough, and I guess, again, it's quite specific property by property, isn't it? They're all individual beasts on their own. I can guarantee what I'm about to say is true, which is I bet no one has ever read an energy performance certificate. But landlords should have EPCs for their properties. But ironically, if you go to the EPC for the property, they actually make recommendations. So what they will say is, if you do this, it will improve the rating to X. If you do this, it will improve the rating. So funny enough, there's things that spring to mind generically, I guess, but specifically property by property, your EPC will give you the answer. I have no doubt you would read some of those and think, well, that is not cost effective. And that would genuinely be true. But the EPC is a useful starting point because they do make sort of suggestions as to if you did this, this, and this, you would change your rating to this. So yeah, maybe have a look at the EPC as a starting point. I think a lot of the common sense things we do as part of our normal sort of property maintenance. So if the property needs a new boiler, it gets a new efficient boiler. If the windows are old and rotten, we get new UPVC windows. So a lot of stuff I would like to think gets done as part of a rolling program anyway. The things that get done in these funding programs are really things we probably wouldn't be reachable as landlords. So, solar panels, heat source pumps that are sort of £8,000 to £10,000 a time, they're not things that we could probably fund ourselves. And this is where some funding mechanism has to sort of help.
And then just another question I've got, do you think the EPC grading itself will actually become more governed and a bit more got a bit more guidelines to it itself, because currently it isn't in any way whatsoever.
It's a fair point. They've not said anything about sort of changing the assessment process, but I take the point, actually. It's very, I think if you send two different assessors to the same property, you possibly get different answers, which shouldn't be the case. I mean, I've heard horror stories of EPC assessors who they charge so little, you know, and I think back in the day, you've heard about EPC assessors who would just prepare one and not even attend the property, and they would take their £40, which, yeah, the rogues of the industry, I guess. So, no, I've not heard anything about sort of reforming the process. It is very focused on the ultimate rating and you know, and improving that ultimate rating. Sometimes it's helpful to be there with the assessor and have a chat with them to see what, you know, if you're wanting to improve that rating, and if you can be there to have a chat with them, it might be that they can squeeze it up a little bit. There just seems to be a little bit of manoeuvre if you sort of chat with them and you're nice with them, which really shouldn't be the case. It's a fixed model, but I take the point. It's quite a fluid system, but no, they don't seem to propose any direct changes to the system. It will be whatever your rating is, and this is where it needs to be.
And I've also had some people basically express an interest in that offer, so I have put my email down in the chat, just if you do want to use that, to just drop me an email saying you're interested, but please title it accordingly. I get a lot of emails, so sifting through them would be a lot easier.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Well made. Yeah, that's a good point. People are welcome to do it tonight, and then I guess we've got it. But at least we can come back to people. So yes. Yeah, that's good. But there's a real opportunity there, I think. And personally, you know, why shouldn't tenants have better, more efficient homes? Absolutely. But if we can get, this might be a nice place where if we can get some funding and some help, as landlords, let's take advantage of it. And there's one thing I will say, actually, even for own homes, so it isn't only tenanted properties. So if you as a landlord are in a property that you think is D-rated or below and you meet the criteria, you could also be eligible, basically. So it isn't just private tenants, it will be homeowner occupiers as well, which is interesting.